man, let's get into Twitter because I feel like we buried the lead last week and we promised this dissection of this crazy, awesome Twitter thread. And then we ended up talking about other great stuff for so long we didn't have time to get into this. So we promised that this week is going to be straight up Twitter thread, and we're going to start right there.
We're going to start at the Twitter thread, and I have a funny story about this Twitter thread.
Okay, let's hear it.
So forgive me if I mispronounce his last name. DiPietro?
DiPietro. I think it's
DiPietro. Okay. Yeah. Jordan DiPietro. We talked about him briefly, and he was the guy where last week I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this guy follows me. And then he went to you and was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Tim follows me. Look at this screenshot, whatever. This is how much of a pro this guy is. So I have taken your system of newsletters for myself and implemented a paid newsletter that I work with my friend Corey on. It's called the Bootstrapper, and it's $7 a month, and it's just my front end product, exactly like you told me. So we sold like 70 subscriptions so far, and it's been cool to see like this thing coming into fruition, right? The sales page of my product, I spent days on. And one of my favorite sayings in marketing is everybody thinks they're a good writer until they have to write sales copy. And like this thing was brutal. It was so painful to get through, especially the first like 2,000 words. It's a sales letter, so it's pretty long. And then once you got to like the features and the benefits, I was able to roll through it a little bit because I was basically just like listing some of the things that we were offering with it. Okay. So Jordan signs up for my newsletter and he gets my automation of it. He sends me a Loom randomly, just saying like, hey man, I got this email. I'm thinking like, oh my God, this is Tim. And so I checked out your product, the Bootstrapper, and your sales copy is like not that fucking good. Basically, he tells me in this Loom video, and he broke down the first, let's say 800 words of my sales page from the title to the hook to the lead and like a bunch of the things that I was missing. And then like the best part about it is I asked him a bunch of questions and he says, hey man, like, if you want, you can book an appointment with me, you know, and he sent me like an invite link to some like $1,000 an hour meeting to go over my sales page or something. And I've been talking with him on Twitter ever since. And there's a good chance I'm actually going to take him up on this because if I can double my sales, then I'll make that money back in a month and a half. So I wanted to preface that by saying that everything we're about to go through in this Twitter thread is like no joke because I'm pretty good at this. And this guy like totally schooled me. So I had to start with that story.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. I love to hear that. So for anybody who maybe didn't hear last week's episode or is brand new to the show, the guy we're talking about, Jordan DiPietro, runs HubSpot Media. So he oversees the company that I work for, Trends, and he also oversees like our other newsletters, podcasts, YouTube channels, everything. Before he came and did that, he spent more than a decade building the Motley Fool. And so he ran at least one product over there, but was also heavily involved with several others. And the tweet that we're going to break down today, by the way, if you don't know, Motley Fool does hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Yeah, so he's very familiar. Yeah. So for him to reach out to Tim and say, hey, your sales copy's not that good. That's like, I don't know how long the Loom was, but you know, it's,
I'll put it in the show notes. It was like 5 minutes.
Yeah. This is a guy who's sold $800+ million worth of newsletters. So it's pretty cool to get advice from him on that kind of thing. He released a tweet thread recently, which is what we're going to break down today, where he said basically over the course of that decade, he kept track of a whole bunch of marketing experiments that they ran. And he basically just dug through all his old notes and found, I think it was 9 of his favorite growth hacks for selling newsletters specifically, but like pretty much anything. I think a lot of these are pretty universal. And so he's a total goat. Like he knows what he's talking about. It's cool that he reaches out. That's like I think like that's a cool move to build relationships with anybody.
What a good move. And yeah. I'm so sold on it too. It instantly made me think like, why am I not doing this?
Yeah. So we're going to break down his tweet thread today. And we've done a couple of these so far. We've broken down threads from, who was it? Nathan Barry?
Yeah.
We did one on how he built ConvertKit. We've done others in the past. Yeah. Do you want to share your screen or do you want me to share my screen?
You share your screen because I can't find it. I had it somewhere. Hold on one second. Do you have it pulled up?
Yeah, I got it right here. I've also got a whole bunch of like notes and stuff too.
And this is a good one to watch on YouTube, by the way. Most people listen to the podcast, but if you're
Yeah.
feeling inclined, this is all on video, so this is a good one to watch.
Yeah, we'll talk through a lot of it so that if you are listening, you'll still totally get everything. But if you want to see some of the stats and stuff like that he shares, it can be really cool to see him on screen. Okay, so let me just read the intro, like the hook here, and then there's 9 individual growth hacks. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them, but we're gonna get through as many as we can. We're going to talk through not only his ideas here, but also like some of the add-on stuff that Tim and I have learned through the course of our experience.
Yeah.
Over the past 10 years, I led growth for a $1 billion plus company. That's Motley Fool. I ran over 1,000 experiments, copy tests, order page tests, price tests, email tests. Here's an inside look at my personal notes plus 9 growth hacks that you can immediately steal with data. And he delivers. So I'm going to go through the growth hacks at a high level first, and then we'll drill down on each one. So number 1, gamification increases conversions. We'll talk about that. Number 2, direct mail is simple and has crazy high ROI. Number 3, long campaigns should have soft and hard close. And, well, we're going to talk about all these, but there's some really cool tactics related to that I want to get into. Number 4, engagement leads to higher conversions. 5, recency is a top 3 indicator of conversion rate. 6, turn almost buyers into buyers. That's dealing with your abandoned carts. And then 7, order page engagement can be positive. 8, multiple order page visits is a good thing. And 9, short form loses to long form. So there's a lot here. We're going to start I think we should just start from the top and we'll work our way down. Some of these intertwine with each other. So as we go, we'll be able to kind of like wrap 1 or 2 of them into the same part of the conversation. But I think it'll be cool to take a look at what he put here and then also just add some of the things that we've seen out in the wild or worked with in our own businesses. Well, actually, I'm gonna summarize his thoughts first, and I'll paraphrase. And if Jordan hears this and he thinks I got it wrong, apologies. But we're basically, we're being like archaeologists on tweets here. So we've got 200 some odd characters to work with to figure out what he means. So this idea of gamification increasing conversions, his basic idea was, look, if you can figure out a way to like identify and reward your more engaged people, that will motivate them to stay engaged and also to convert that status into purchases later on, especially if the rewards that you give them have some kind of like financial aspect to them. So what he says is highly engaged names on the email list are awarded credits. Those credits could be applied to future products. Highest credit people had 24x higher conversion rates when he ran this experiment. And then he lists a couple of ways that you could execute on this yourself. So he says earning a credit could be as simple as clicking a button, downloading a module, opening an email. And the bottom line is that it doesn't have to be complicated. Let people just earn credits or give them away. And people with credits want to use them. So there's a lot to dissect there, but I'll pause there just for your early thoughts on this idea in general.
Yeah, the last line is the most important. People with credits want to use them. Like, it's impossible not to do it. You ever read Hooked?
No. What do they talk about?
He's got some interesting stuff on gamification. It's a little bit more complicated and is much more about like the slot machine brain that we all have with social media, like the random rewards. But this is kind of the same. It's a random reward because, well, it doesn't have to be random, but that's what it has me thinking. Like all of a sudden you stack up these points and you stack up these points. It's like, well, what am I going to do with these points? I got to use them.
Right.
So I love it. It's so cool. It makes me think of SparkToro as well.
What does SparkToro do related to this?
So if you share the newsletter, then you get points, basically. It's a referral program. It's a third-party referral software that APIs into ConvertKit.
Like SparkLoop.
Oh, shit. I'm so sorry. I said SparkToro. I meant SparkLoop. SparkToro was Rand Fishgren's company. So SparkLoop is what I actually meant. I said the wrong word.
Oh, you okay? Well, so I think that's a great point. Until you said it, hadn't thought of SparkLoop in this context. But I agree that last line is the most important one. I catch myself in this all the time. What this makes me think of is Huckberry. Do you ever read their stuff?
Mm-mm.
So Huckberry's like, I guess they're like an e-com company. I don't even really know how to describe them because what they have their own brands, but for the most part, they'll like sell other brands at a discount, and it's all men's stuff. And
yeah, they got like hipster boots and like cool flannel shirts and stuff. Yeah, I know who Huckberry is.
Pocket knives and bandanas and stuff. Yeah. But the thing is, it's actually a lot of stuff that I don't personally need, but their email is so cool. I don't even know how they do this. They invest, it must be so much money photographing their products, because everything that they sell, they've got these crazy cool lifestyle photo shoots where, you know, the people are like wearing the hipster boots under a waterfall in Iceland and stuff like that. So I read every single newsletter, even though I think I've only maybe bought from Huckberry once. And the one time that I did, it was because when you get an account on the website, I might screw up the process here, but there were credits in that account. It was like $5. And everything on that website's expensive. Like I spent way more than $5.
Dude, this is insane. $105 for sandals. That's basically like a piece of styrofoam that you stand on. What is this?
I don't know. It's all luxury stuff, but the thing that's made me think of Huckberry for this was what you just said, and what he said here, which is like people with credits want to use them. Yeah. I probably never would have bought from them, but they just like preload that account with a little bit, and now it got me thinking of like what you said. It was just like, well, I have to use this. How am I going to use this? And I ended up using it on like $300 worth of shirts. So the $5 credit, I think, ended up paying off for them. But there's another, like, what I wanted to dig into related to this is like, well, how do you actually pull this off? Because if you're going to do this, there aren't a lot of platforms out there that are specifically designed to measure who is most engaged inside your email list and then reward them with points or something like that. I mean, in fact, to my knowledge, well, I guess Sparkloop might be one. If you're counting like shares as engagement, maybe. There's also probably some, what do they call that when you do like a giveaway, but it's not just a giveaway. It's a
raffle,
like a raffle, but there's a specific term for it where every time you do something, like every time you share or every time somebody signs up with your code, you get another entry into the drawing. It's a specific type of game, and there's platforms that are designed to do that. So those reward specific action. But outside of that, I don't really know of any platform that's going to pay attention to like your open rates and then assign a new point to every single person who opens email. But I think there could be a lot of value in developing something like that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why it's tricky. This whole topic of like rewarding and gamifying is tricky because a lot of companies right now are trying to make it harder to see that information. So Apple rolled out their iOS 15 last summer, which was huge because for the first time they were like specifically getting in the way of your ability to see who opened, and other companies are following suit, but it's still possible to see some of this. So if you have some coding skills, I think you can jerry rig a system. And what I wanted to point out for this one in particular is this newsletter, Inverse Daily. Have you seen this?
No, but I love everything about it.
So Dave Nemitz is one of the co-founders on this. This is like one of his newer projects after the Bleacher Report. And to be honest, I don't really even know what it's about. I mean that in a good way, which is like every time I open this, it's about something completely different. And so I think it's just one of these like wide ranging, super interesting newsletters about like, they'll talk about space. They talk about Vikings. They talk about dinosaurs. They talk about all kinds of stuff.
Three of my favorite things right from the very beginning.
And they talk about Batman. Yeah. So I really don't even know what it's about, but they do the cool, like they are the only newsletter, and I look at newsletters for a living. They're the only one that I found that does this. And I think it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. They have these stats at the bottom that show you how many times you've opened the newsletter and like where you fall. For people who are just listening, I'm looking, it says lifetime stats. You've opened the 50 times. Lifetime opens, and you rank in the 82nd percentile of readers with 50 lifetime opens. So they've built something on the back end that's basically looking at that same pixel, you know, that you use to count open rates. And for anybody who doesn't know how that works, it's pretty simple. There's just a little, like 1 pixel by 1 pixel
little image.
Yep. And
because we talked about that. That was fascinating to learn about that.
Did we? We talked when I was here talking about newsletters, or when
it was one of our first episodes that we did together. I was in Miami when we recorded it. Yeah.
It's basically just an image that loads, and because every single issue of the email gets its own unique image. So your server can look at how many of those images loaded, which is a pretty rough estimate for how many people opened the email. It doesn't work perfectly because some people automatically don't load images, right? So their pixel will be blocked. And then, of course, iOS is getting in the way. But the big story here is that I think this is the coolest. This is the coolest thing. And I specifically opened this email. Like, I get a little, I don't know, like a little boost of happiness every time I see this. So there's something here. I think they custom coded it, but I think that could definitely work for Jordan's point about gamification. Like, you could build your own version of that and then award points. Yeah. Did you have anything else to say related to gamification?
No, I have a lot of ideas, but I'm gonna do some experiments on my own, and maybe we'll talk about this in a later issue. This is fascinating to me, but I want to move on.
Okay. All right. So moving on, this is number 2. Direct mail is simple and has crazy high ROI. So here's the context of his experiment. We used direct mail for high-priced products, focused entirely on the sales copy, and had a 56% conversion rate lift during this campaign. And then he showed some data. It looks like no sales promo. There were like 2,500 people in that test group, and they converted about 1.64%, or precisely 1.64%. And then there was a group of about 37,000 that they tested with a sales promo, converted at 2.56%. So yeah, 56% lift over the baseline. And so what he says, you should use your highest converting sales letter, segment your list using RFM, and then focus on copywriting, not design. There's a lot to unpack there, but I want to pause for just a second to see what
does RFM mean?
Great question. So I didn't know either. It turns out it's a framework that's typically used in direct sales to talk about segmenting your most valuable clients. So RFM stands for recency, frequency, and monetary value. And that means, how recently did they buy from you? How frequently do they buy from you? And then what's their typical either average order value or total order value. And it sounds like what they're doing is targeting people who score higher on that list with these direct mail campaigns.
Yeah, I get it.
What's interesting about that framework is that the recency thing actually ties in with a different tweet later on. And we can probably skip it for the most part because he basically just says recency has a very high correlation with conversion. In fact, I'll just pull it real quick. So recency is the top 3 indicator of conversion rate. So this is important. When you're thinking about this RFM thing, he says recency, super, super high value indicator of conversion rate. We tracked and segmented recent purchasers, created an instant upgrade execution, and it had a 2.2% conversion rate versus 0.35% against the baseline. So that's 5 or 6x over the baseline. So recency is a very high indicator of people who are ready to upgrade. He says it's a high measure of engagement, can help you manage your ad dollars better if you're targeting people based on recency, and helps you execute quick upsells. So that's the RFM thing. But this concept of direct mail is very interesting to me. I actually wrote an article about how I think direct mail is coming back. So I really want to dig in on this topic a little bit more because there's actually a lot to talk about here.
Please, I fucking hate mail.
Okay, you hate getting it, or have you actually experimented with it as a marketer?
I hate getting it. But okay. I mean, hold on, because here's where my brain's at right now. I think magazines are going to make a comeback because I think people just miss sitting on the couch and reading stuff.
Yep.
And sales letters are different than all the, every month I get a receipt from PNC Bank. I use PNC. And every fucking month I reach out to them and I say, hey, stop mailing me this. And they say, we can't. They are federally mandated, or whatever the word is, to mail out, because then it covers their ass to say, we told you what your balance was. So if anybody ever comes back and yells about the overdraft fees, because the banking industry basically runs off of overdraft fees, they can say, we did everything we could to reach out to you, right? And so that drives me absolutely insane. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself, when's the last time I got a cool sales letter in the mail? What if I got a sales letter tomorrow from The Hustle, and it was one of your Sunday posts that my wife loves, the Sunday Post, whatever that guy's name is. He's super, super freaking talented. She reads them to me every week. She absolutely loves them. Like, what if those things came in the mail as a sales letter, and instead of being 6 inches away from her face with her phone, my wife is sitting down on the couch reading a sales letter? I could definitely see that being effective, as long as it's not PNC Bank sending me another 8 statements, which makes me want to die.
Okay, so I totally agree with you about magazines, because I think people are getting a little overwhelmed with the constant distraction of the internet. And also, there's just sort of like a nostalgia feature there. So I've actually written about the comeback that magazines are making. I think magazines are a huge opportunity right now, especially, have we talked about this? Especially if you run like a D2C company.
Yeah.
Any kind of e-com brand. If you can acquire a magazine in your space, there's like a lot of opportunity there. But related to the direct mail, I think there are a lot of really interesting points to consider here. So one is that most people are not using direct mail right now. It's a very uncrowded channel. As you mentioned, you don't even remember the last time you sat down and read like a really good sales letter there. So, and we actually charted this. So if you look at like the search volume, Google search volume of Facebook.
Oh man,
ads,
am I in the back end of trends right now? Damn.
Yeah. You're just seeing behind the paywall.
VIP.
Like searches for Google ads, Facebook ads basically lifted off around 2008 or 9, whenever they started advertising. And it's just, for the most part, climbed ever since, except for in the last year or so. They've just become untenably expensive. But direct mail has fallen consistently for the last 15 or 20 years. And so there's a really interesting opportunity there, just because it's totally uncrowded. Like, and this instinctively. Like, you said you hate mail, right? When's the last time you got a piece of mail that even felt thoughtful? It's like nobody's competing well on mail. It's all just junk. So anybody who's out there doing anything like innovative has a huge standout opportunity. And that's where the second part of this comes in. I didn't think about this until I started researching it, but it turns out, man, there's so much opportunity to get attribution for direct mail that was never possible before because of technology. So the way that like the best direct mail worked in the past, it was really hard to get attribution for direct mail. You would basically, if let's say it was during the days of the internet, you would set up a URL with like a unique name,
or like a phone number, like a
specific phone number. Yeah, exactly. And that's how you would track how effective the direct mail campaign was. However many people visited that website, and then however many people converted. And it's really hard to get people to do that because it's a huge obstacle, right? But now some huge percentage of the country has like Amazon Alexas in their house, or that, like everybody's got a smartphone on them. And so what direct mail is doing now is they're using things like QR codes,
hell yeah,
even voice commands. So you open the mail, and the whole thing, like, it hooks your interest, it gets you interested, and it says, hey, if you're interested in this and you have a Google Home, just say, hey, Google, show me the Motley Fool, or whatever. Or like you direct voice commands that can interact with a smart home with direct mail as the kickoff point. And
that's such easy copy too. Like if there's direct mail with quotations around it, because better than I do, quotations are some of the best headlines that there are. And so like if on the sales letter you just like have in quotes and say, hey Alexa, say Motley Fool, whatever, Motley Fool mailer, and it brings you right to that page.
Yep. Or like, hey Alexa, tell me about the Fool's research package, or whatever the voice command is. So there's opportunities now to bring people in with a much lower barrier to entry, to attribute them with much higher, I guess, like fidelity than you ever had before. There's way less competition than there's ever been before. And that doesn't even touch the possibility of things like augmented reality that can be done on mail, like where people point their phone at it and all of a sudden they're immersed in some kind of experience related to your brand.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to know who's on the absolute vanguard of this?
It's probably somebody that's super boring that is always doing it. Tell me.
The freaking U.S. Postal Service. Look at this. They have this whole website called Irresistible Mail, which is all about like using this advanced technology in order to integrate VR, AR experiences into direct mail campaigns.
A lot of people don't realize the U.S. Postal Service isn't a government-run agency.
It's not? I didn't realize
I think it's kind of like the Federal Reserve. Like it's a private enterprise that has like specific contracts with the government. somebody's going to listen to this and probably troll me and be like, you don't know what you're talking about, Tim. But
actually, they're a special status contractor.
Yeah. But it's like its own entity. They can make their own decisions. So
that's interesting. Well, I think this is really where they're trying to build their future. I know the USPS has had a hard time with stuff, but they have you look at some of these campaigns, they have crazy, interesting, dynamic campaigns that are just integrating physical mail and the virtual world. And I was so surprised when I saw that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. But even beyond that, I know a lot of people who are using physical mail to extremely good effect. How do you say that? To good effect?
That works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like there's this guy, his name is Chris Orzechowski. He's a member of our community. And for people who are just listening, if you check out irresistibleMail.com, we'll link to it in the show notes. There's all kinds of crazy campaigns people are doing in the mail, and nobody's focused on this. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. But I know other people. So like this guy, Chris Orzechowski, he's an email marketing specialist, and he runs a private, like he calls it a secret print newsletter, where every single month he sends, like a 2-page newsletter to people in the mail. He calls it the Make It Rain newsletter. I've got his page for it right here. And it has like crazy high conversion rates for customers to his agency. And I don't know, I haven't looked at the rates of this right now, like what it costs to actually print and send a newsletter, but it's got to be pretty cheap,
I love doing this podcast.
Like
what is
stuff.
This?
It's print newsletter, man. And I know other people who do this too. When I was doing web dev, I worked with an attorney. He was a patent attorney for the firearms industry. So very, very specific. And he would send out a print newsletter every single month in a special orange envelope. So it sticks out in the mail. And he used to have a book, a print book that he wrote himself and printed it on Amazon, whatever they call it, like Amazon direct fulfillment. So Amazon would print it and ship it. And he would give this book away for free because like his rates were high enough and his conversion rates were high enough that he knew if he could get like one in so many people on the phone, he could definitely convert them and it would definitely be worth it. And whenever anybody offers a free book, they're always talking about a download these days.
Yeah.
So he would literally just, at whatever it costs, probably cost like $3 to $5 for him to print and ship this book. But that was his, his like standout in the industry, super effective lead magnet.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I think I've been rambling for a while now, but I think there's so much opportunity tied up in direct mail, mostly because most people suck at it.
So fun. All right. I can't wait to dive into this stuff on my own time. Let's keep going because I really want to get through this. I think we can skip over number 5 a bit because we went through it, but we got a few more.
Yeah, a couple more. So here's number 3. Long campaigns should have hard and soft closes. So here's the idea. A great soft close has a countdown. The price goes up after the soft close and a feature is removed that generates crazy urgency and increased conversion rates. Bottom line, having a countdown or deadline drives urgency. 80% of your sales are going to come before that soft close, but you'll still end up with stragglers who pay at a higher price. So this is like product launch 101. Have you ever experimented with anything related to this?
Always. Yeah.
Talk me through how
one of the things about trends that I'm always so shocked that I don't see. I don't know if you guys have a deadline funnel because you guys have a free sign up on your homepage, which I guess is how you do all of your sales, where you don't actually like list your quote unquote product in the same way that you would see traditionally. And so I've always thought to myself, like, I'm sure there's some deadline funnels behind the scenes, but deadlinefunnels.com is an amazing product. Like
deadlinefunnels.com.
Yeah. I mean,
you guys use it for what? For Copyblogger or for Stodzy?
Everything. For everything. It APIs into Podia, which is really, really cool. So if you have, like, you can have your main product and then you can have the same exact product, you just replicate it, and then like the same exact sales page and just replicate it. And Podia allows you to make the cheaper product hidden and then like the cheaper product sales page hidden so that you can't get it to it directly. Yeah, I use this with Copyblogger, definitely. I'll tell you, really, when I did the Copyblogger deal, I was excited to learn I think the most valuable skill I've learned from doing digital product sales has been how to build deadline funnels, because that freaking countdown timer, it's just irresistible. Like there's nothing you can do about it. And the hard part is, I shouldn't say the hard part, like where he said at the thread, the straggler, so many emails like, oh man, I just missed this offer. I really want to buy. Like, can you send it to me again? And you have to be like, nope, can't do it. You missed it. And I wouldn't say every time. I'd say most of the time they don't buy when they miss the deadline, but some definitely do. And it keeps you like true to your word, so you have to keep your integrity. Yeah, it's a little complicated to use at first if you don't get it, but the software itself isn't complicated. It's just the idea is complicated because you're making basically like different copies of the same exact sales page. And so you can kind of get lost. Like, wait a minute, is this the $10 off offer or is this the $20 off offer? And so like you're clicking around a lot, to make sure that you have it all set up nice and tight. But yeah, for sure, deadlinefunnels.com changed my life.
So the idea behind this then is it's a funnel with deadlines that are unique to every single user that goes into it, right? Whereas, so let's say it's like you have 3 hours to claim this. That's not a campaign that you launch now and then end in 3 hours. That's a campaign that's always running, and anybody who enters the funnel has 3 hours to take action. That's the idea.
Sort of. You can do both. And so one of the reasons why I'm going to give you an example of how it gets kind of tricky that you don't think of until you just start experimenting with it. You want to, if you're running funnels through an automation, you have to think about what it is that actually triggers the countdown timer. And so you would think, okay, as soon as they get to the page, then that triggers the countdown timer. But that's not actually true, because let's say the funnel expires at 11:59 p.m. Eastern in 4 days, but they don't open the first email in the automation. They open the second email, but the second email comes 1 day after the first email. And so they don't get to the actual landing page, which triggers the countdown, until the day after other people do. So when if you set the trigger by landing on the page, you're going to have a whole slew of people that their timer is actually off from when their emails are telling them that the offer expires. So like there's ways to do it where as soon as you land on the page, the funnel triggers and the countdown timer triggers. But what I like most about it is it APIs with ConvertKit. So you can set a tag that basically says like, okay, if you're looking at the visual map of ConvertKit, the top is the form. They get into the form. Right underneath, I'm pointing into the camera basically, so like you can see it visually. So right underneath the form is the tag that triggers the deadline funnel. And so even if they don't actually click on the link, because most of them click on the very last one, because the last email you send says there's only 2 hours left.
Yeah.
Right. And so like if you don't map the whole thing out perfectly, it'll get screwed up. So that when they click on the link that goes to the sales page in the only 2 hours left email, there's actually 2 hours left in the funnel on the timer in the bottom of the page. So it took me a while to get the hang of it, but once you do, it's like it's so good. It really jacks up your conversions.
That's awesome. I think this whole concept of creating scarcity and incentivizing people, and urgency, incentivizing people to act is a bit of an art, and it takes some confidence in your product. I think I've noticed a lot of people are hesitant to do this. One of the best executions that I saw was Steph Smith's increasing price campaign.
Yeah, she just kept increasing every time more and more people bought it.
Yeah. For anybody who didn't see this go down, Steph Smith, obviously a well-known creator. She's a colleague of mine. And a couple of years ago, she launched her first info product, which was going to be like a huge ebook all about how to do content marketing. She had run like a content marketing team for a long time. And so she had a lot of interesting things to say about that. So what she did was, it was really interesting to see her go through this process. She basically pre-sold the product. She tweeted about it. She said, hey, I just found this document in my Google Drive. It's like an outline for a book about X, Y, and Z. If I finish this, would anybody buy it? And a whole bunch of people said, yeah, I would totally buy it. So then the very next thing she did, and I've looked at the timestamps on these tweets, it was literally like that same day. She went to Gumroad She put up a quick landing page describing exactly what she described in the tweet. And the brilliant stroke was she set probably 5 or 6 different price tiers. And she said the first 30 people who buy are going to get it for $10. And the next 30 people are going to get it for 15. And the next 30 are going to get it for 20. And it just went up and up from there. And what that did, similar to the time thing, is it incentivizes people to act now. Because even if they're not totally sure if they want it, they are totally sure that they are never going to get it for a better price than right now.
Yeah.
And here's the interesting thing. She did that all manually. There is no built-in feature on Gumroad that just allows you to incrementally raise your price. And I think that could be such a cool feature for somebody to build into, I don't know, like maybe WordPress or WooCommerce. Like, I think that could be a really successful app, is just a plugin that allows you to auto increment prices on a product.
You're so right.
Yeah, because right now everyone's doing it manually. So there's an opportunity for people who are interested.
You came up with 2 like super dope products even in this podcast. The first one was the first one I'm still really, really thinking about, because that timer at the bottom of the email, I totally forget what the email is. People listening are gonna be like, wait, what are you talking about?
Inverse daily.
Yeah. Okay. So a way to track and not track, display to the user what their credits are. So you literally have a score. It's like an esport. You know what I mean? Like your MMR or your MRR. I can't remember which one it is. The more you win, the higher your points get. And the more you lose, the lower your points get. And as somebody that is still like a recovering StarCraft addict, like I know that feeling when you lose points and you're like, fuck, I'm under 3,000, you know? And so getting your points up. So that's one product you came up with. And now this one, which is like an incremental tier price increaser. And it can't be that hard to code.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it can't be.
Yeah. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize that about gamifying systems too. It's like your main goal is to appeal to people like you who are recovering StarCraft addicts, or like people look at like referral programs and they're like, oh, I want to get everybody to refer somebody. No, you don't. You want to appeal to like the one person in your audience who wants to win and will refer 3,000 people in order to get that $5 mug that you're offering. Okay, couple of more. Let's keep going. Let's pick some favorites here. Let's see. Engagement leads to higher conversions. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. The point was really like the more people are engaged pre-launch, the more likely they are to buy. And he shows some really interesting data there. We're not going to dive into it, but
share your screen again.
Sure. The basic idea is that if you run like a pre-engagement campaign in order to warm up your list before you try and sell something, you're going to do better. And I think that is interesting and obvious when you think about it.
Yeah.
So we talked about the recency thing. Then 6, 7, 8, and 9. 6 is turn almost buyers into buyers. 7 is order page engagement can be positive. 8 is multiple order page visits is a good thing. And then 9 is short form loses to long form. So really these are like 3 different things. Almost buyers, engagement page, and how long should your copy be? Let's start with the order page engagement, because this actually speaks to a few things here. What he's saying when he says order page engagement can be positive, what he's talking about is he says, historically, the wisdom was don't distract people on your order page. Once they get to the order page, just get them through the system and have them check out. And what he says,
thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And what he says is he's like, actually, we presented anchor links to a test group, and the test group had a 9x conversion lift versus the control group. So I think what he's saying there is that like actually distractions on the order page are not universally bad. You just have to make sure that you're presenting something that's super valuable there.
Yeah.
And I agree with this. This is actually like what's interesting about this is that because of this wisdom, the order page is typically mostly empty real estate. It's probably the most valuable real estate you have on your site because somebody's literally preparing to buy and people leave it mostly empty. And so there's actually a lot you can do with that space, like upsells or cross sells or testimonials, like building more social credit there that would technically be considered a distraction, but is worth experimenting with because it can really help nudge people over the edge.
This is cool. For me personally, I think this is the one that I would spend the least amount of time caring about. I think subject lines for conversion nerds get a ton of testing on emails. Like, what's the best subject line? What's the best subject line for open rates? The best subject line from open rates is a subject line that is from a person that gets a lot of open rates, And so it's like, so Seth Godin sends something every day. He's probably got 1 million plus subscribers, and he realistically has like a 50 to 60% open rate. I think Tim Ferriss is probably another example of this. Like, his emails are still so long and boring, and it's basically just like the cluttered blog post of his podcast with, since you can't embed iframes into email, he just takes a picture of the media player, and makes that as like the click link to listen to the podcast. But same thing, he's got 1 million plus subscribers, and I bet he's at 50 to 60%. So I'm not saying that this isn't cool. I'm just saying that out of all the things that I could spend my time testing and thinking about, this would probably be last, because if they're on the order page and they already decided that they're going to buy, then they're going to buy. And so I think it's kind of like, spinning in circles on this one.
Another interesting thing to think about related to Tim Ferriss and subject lines is that his subject lines are always the same. So he really is a perfect example of what you're getting at, because Tim Ferriss sends 2 emails. There's 5 Bullet Friday.
Yep.
And then there's the new from Tim Ferriss update, which is what you were talking about, like just a huge mashup of everything he's published or posted somewhere recently. They're always the same. What's different, or what's not different, but what stands out is that it's from Tim.
It's from Tim, exactly.
Yeah. That Chris Orzechowski guy that I mentioned, I interviewed him about this because his whole business revolves around like helping people boost their open rates. And that is one of the things that he said too. He's like, there are certain things that will make for a better subject line than another, right? Like, if your subject line gets people to ask a question, or it opens a question that it doesn't answer, right? And that can lead to higher clicks. But one of the points he made is like, at the end of the day, it's the from line that matters most, And the way you build that is by delivering great content over and over and over again, so that people look forward to your stuff. Like Huckberry, again, I don't even know I have no idea what their subject line is. I just always open it, So there's something to what you're saying. I think if you're in a position where you can be optimizing your order page, then obviously do. But this ties in with something that I wanted to say related to this whole thread. I have a couple of notes that I think speak to the entire thread. One of them is that if you look at this data, there's one thing that I really like that he presented here, which is these are all statistically significant sample sizes. He's talking about presenting these pages to thousands, like right here. It looks like I think I'm getting this right. Percent number of UIDs. It looks like they presented these tests to 700. Why does that say? 746,932 people. So if you're going, what Tim is saying, don't overanalyze this if you don't have thousands and thousands of visitors going through this funnel. But if you are at that point, obviously you're in a position where you could potentially squeeze out some extra optimization. And in that case, it's important to know not only that, order page engagement can be positive, but also what he says down here, which is that multiple order page visits can be a good thing. So he says, we rallied around driving multiple order page visits. We staffed up with a telesales team to support this.
Cool.
And then conversion rate was 16x for an engaged order page visitor. And so I would love to have him on and talk through some of the specifics of what that actually looked like. But it sounds like what he's getting at with both these tweets is that those people who kind of like abandon their cart or don't go all the way through your funnel,
they tinker around.
Yeah, very high value group. And so if you can zero in on those people and continue to nudge them, it sounds like they convert at high rates, or at least they can if you're testing interesting things.
For sure. I learned about abandoned carts and this type of buyer who wants to but thinks about it a lot. There's some really cool Shopify applications. Shopify calls them applications. They're plugins. It's basically the same exact thing to automate emails and incentives for people that just haven't quite made up their mind. I still have my dinky little t-shirt company that I keep basically just so I can randomly hear the cha-ching sound coming from my phone from the Shopify app, because it's one of like the best marketing decisions in the history of the world. And when I was really into it, like seriously, this was, 8 years ago, I would come into my office before everybody, and I would package up all the products, and I would write like little handwritten notes on the poly bags and send them to the post office, and it was like a really fun experience. But one of the things I remember learning most about with how much of a difference it made is like actively and ruthlessly is too strong of a word, but what's the word? Like persistently targeting people who abandon their cart, because they're never going to come back. Like if you don't get them after persisting them a couple of times, like at first I was like, oh, I don't want to annoy them, but if it doesn't really matter, because if they don't make the sale, they're never going to make the sale. So like it's
Right.
okay to kind of annoy them to the point where they disengage from your brand, because if they don't make the sale, they were going to disengage anyway. So I don't know it to the extent that he does with this, but abandoned carts is something that I had a lot of fun with my t-shirt company, and it's definitely a way to increase revenue, no question.
That's interesting. That brings us, I think, to the last one here, which is that short form loses to long form. And I feel like this is one we could probably do an entire episode on, but the idea is basically tied in with something we were talking about early on here, your copywriting. And, tests say, what did he say? Pricey products means lengthy decisions.
Yeah,
Long
good
form
line.
copy almost always outperforms. So he ran a test, looks like about 5,000 people, and the short form copy underperformed by 24% against the longer form counterpart. It says the bottom line, short form copy can crush for products that are less than $100. And keep in mind, when Tim and I talked through this process, so if you're thinking from a newsletter perspective, less than $100, that's your front end product for the most part, $50 to $100 a year. Long form copy crushes with products that are over $100. Hire a killer copywriter. They're expensive, but they're worth their weight in gold. And I was talking to a guy yesterday who's paying like $10,000 to have one of his sales pages redone.
Yeah.
So when you think about what he means when he says they're expensive, like that's pretty standard. I've even heard them go higher than that. Like if you look at Agora, I don't know exactly what their pricing model is, but I've read some Reddit posts from people who claim to be copywriting for Agora, and they'll say it's something like $10,000 base plus some percent, like 5 to 10% of whatever
5% royalty.
of whatever that page makes. So a single copywriting job can make one of those writers like $100,000 in a year, So yeah, copywriters. That's the thing. They're expensive, but if they sell, they're worth it, So that's it. 9 different growth hacks from somebody who really put these to the test in the trenches. There's super interesting data. Like Tim said, you can either watch this on YouTube or you can go check out the thread. We'll link to it in the show notes. And then I don't know if anybody's reached out to Jordan yet, but if you want him to come
I've been talking to him
show,
on Twitter. I don't think they have. I think he's also like you, where he likes Twitter, but he doesn't waste his time on Twitter.
Yeah, he's still sort of new to that whole arena, so.
But hold on, let me finish this off with one other thing that Jordan said to me, which is going to be an experiment that I'm going to do live in front of everybody.
Uh-oh.
He said, okay, I have $99 is the current price, the main price, the baseline price, I should say. And then if you go through the sales process, the deadline funnel creates a page for 30% off. And so I sell it for $70. And the first thing he said to me is this annual? I said, yeah, of course it's annual. Or why wouldn't it be? And he was like, shouldn't be annual. I was like, but it's a recurring subscription. I was like, why wouldn't I want to make it annual? And it's so obvious now that he says it, but I didn't even think about it. Where the mind frame I'm in, I'm like, oh my God, this is me. Like I'm a bootstrapper. I want to do this. I don't want to worry about VC and be millions of dollars in debt and have people hanging over me. I just want to build a company on my own and do it on the side. Like I'm engaged in that whole entire thing. I'm like, yes, I'm doing this. And I realized that I have to build a yearly relationship with you. I was like, but why? Why would I do that? Like, I don't want to think about you again in a year. I just want to participate. And then I realized your data might be a little bit different. For Copywriter Academy, now digital copywriter, we're usually about 9 to 10 months. That can be like the average lifespan. And so I thought to myself, oh, and even worse than that, you probably know this as well. What happens when people get to that 9 to 10 month, they kind of forget that they're in the membership, that yearly charge hits them. what happens? They email you and they say like, hey, I really, really loved it. Thank you so much, but I got charged and I don't want to be here. Can you refund me? And so I thought to myself, if it's a 10-month span and it's $7 a month, that's what the monthly 30% off is right now. If it's $7 a month at an average of 10 months, why wouldn't I just charge it $70 and be a one-time fee for lifetime access? And I'm going to see how much better that does. Because even when I say it out loud, it's like, so I got to make one decision, one time, for lifetime access. I put in my debit card and I get access to this thing forever. Like how much more frictionless is that than saying like $7 a month? I got to pay this thing every single month. I got to see it come out of my bank account. I don't want to do that. Let me just make a choice and move on. So I'm going to see if this whole like recurring thing, I'm a fan of monthly recurring revenue. Don't get me wrong. But I wonder what's going to happen if I just make my front end product a one-time product, and then that front end product kind of turns more into a filter to qualify people for like a higher dollar back end product.
That's interesting. Was that what he was getting at when he said it shouldn't be annual, or was he getting at the idea that it should be monthly instead of yearly?
He wasn't even saying that it shouldn't be annual. He wasn't telling me what to do at all. He was just painting the picture for me, putting me in the position of the buyer, where it's like, wait a minute, but I need to have, the word that you said that really got me is like, I need to have a relationship with you. Like, that's not really what I want. I just want to make the decision and participate in this. Like, I don't want to have a relationship with you. I was like, oh shit, that is such a good way to think about it. And so I'm going to turn my front end product into a one-time only lifetime access. And then my front end product kind of turns into like a churn to see if I can upsell people on whatever my back end product is going to be.
That's interesting. Nathan Barry does something like that. He has a secret newsletter for wealth.
Yeah.
It's $149 lifetime access. I think I don't know if he kept writing it. The landing page says that there's like 12 issues, but I think he's actually kept it up and continued writing it over the last 1 or 2 years. I just recently signed up, so I'm only a few issues into it, but that's interesting. I think I've seen examples of this done in other arenas where, well, not quite the same thing, but one other thing to think about when you're thinking about pricing on some kind of media product is what capacity you have to continue it. So in the case of something like Trends or the Motley Fool, they've stood up entire teams around it, and they're pretty certain that they can like continue delivering on this thing long term. So it makes sense there to do monthly or even annual pricing. But for newer newsletters that like where you're just kind of testing the waters, it can make sense to either do a one-time fee like this. Like I think actually when we launched Trends, we gave a founding member price where people just bought one time for lifetime access, or short-term pricing. Like I know people who do quarterly pricing, and the reason they do that is because they don't even know if they want to do this business yet. Mm-hmm. And so when you price quarterly, you're never more than 3 months from shutting the whole thing down.
Yeah.
And that can be a little bit tough. Like I think a one-time fee could be tough. I don't think it would be super tough. But if you ever found yourself in a situation where you decided to shut the newsletter down, maybe people would be okay with it if they had access to all the archives. Yeah. But maybe they'd be pissed off because they're not getting any new stuff. But at $70, you just refund them all, whoever just recently bought it. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors to weigh when you're setting a price like this, but I don't think there's any one right answer. I'd be curious to hear more about what he said about it.
Yeah. I'm going to test it out. I'll let you guys know.
Yeah.
Thank you to everybody that is saying cool stuff about us on Twitter. If you would, go to copybloggerpod.com. There's a link on the navigation that says reviews. The best one is the iTunes review. If you could leave us a review, it's the best thing you can do to support the show. We got like 200 something reviews, I think. We've gotten a couple since you and I started doing this, and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you so much, everybody. Please leave us a review. We will, I don't know. I'll Venmo you $1.
Whoa. That just became an expensive episode. Shout out to Vijraj on Twitter, who's been saying nice things about the podcast. We love you guys. Thank you for all the attention and the nice words. We will see you next week.
Great. See you next week.